Good afternoon, all. Welcome to our Leads meetings on Sunday. We had no meetings for the last 2 Sundays because of various reasons. And thank you for joining. And today is more of a open forum. අද මම කතා කරන්න යන්නේ political corruption. ඒක සමහරලාවට interesting නැති topic එකක් වෙන්න පුළුවන් for some people, but that is probably again most important thing that we need to fix if Sri Lanka to recover. So ඒක කියන්න තමයි අද මේ meeting එක focus කරගත්තේ. I will present a few slides. And Fazaheel Faizer also agreed to make a short presentation on this, but he is not here yet. Fazaheel is a airline captain who served in Sri Lankan Airlines in the past. So he's not here, but I will start talking about this. Now, political corruption is talked about by most politicians about corruption in their political platforms these days. But no one really says where is it or how to fix it. They don't say that. Anyway, although they talk it, Faizer is here, so I'll make him a co-host as well so he can make his presentation. Okay, so if you go to a little bit more detail, lots of developed countries and lots of leading politicians who try to develop countries have said this statement that government business is not business and a country is not a company. So this is something that we need to understand. But in Sri Lanka, government business is politicians' business. That's what's been happening for the last 2 decades at least, at the expense of the public. Now, why do I say this? Sri Lanka government is business at the politicians like a business. So they keep doing it. We used these pictures in the past that the politicians are stealing money, covering the face or covering the eyes of the law. This is what this picture is saying. And we call it political looting, and that is rampant. Now, rampant is something that we have perceived because it's very difficult to find data as to how much it is happening. We can only use circumstantial evidence to say that this is happening. So now recently, the political corruption has come out as a word. So this is why I thought it's better to go in detail into it and then find out what political corruption means. I'm glad that it's Faizer who copied this link to me, that political corruption has now appeared with a definition in Wikipedia. And it says the political corruption is the use of powers by government officials or their network contacts for illegitimate private gain. Now, if you all who are living in Sri Lanka know who these people are, your own politicians, isn't there anyone who is not doing this? Now, let's go to a little bit more detail into it. Now, these are the political forms of political corruption that is mentioned in this defined document. And I will just mention these. I'm not going to talk about it. But you yourselves and think whether this is happening with your own known politicians. So it will tell you. Bribery, allas. Lobbying, බලපෑම් කිරීම. Extortion, කප්පම් ගැනීම. Cronyism, ගජමිතුරුවාදය, කියන්නේ තමන්ගේ යාළුවන්ට විතර සලකන එක. Nepotism, ඥාති සංග්‍රහය, මේකත් හොඳටම පේන්න තියෙන දෙයක්. Then parochialism, ප්‍රදේශවාදය, එක ප්‍රදේශයකට විතරක් වැඩ කරන එක. Patronage, අනුග්‍රහය එක පැත්තකට. Influence peddling, බලපෑම් කිරීම. දූෂිත ග්‍රාෆ්ට් දූෂිත වැඩවලට සම්බන්ධ කිරීම, embezzlement වංචා කිරීම. So ඉතින් මේවා දැන් අපේ පොලිටිෂියන් දිහා බැලුවොතින් පවර් එකේ ඉන්න කය ඒක ඔපොසිෂන් ඉන්න අය ඔක්කොම මෙහෙම දේවල් කරන්නේ නැද්ද කියන එක හිතලා බලන්න පොඩ්ඩක්. එතකොට what happens is when you have this kind of political corruption, it facilitates drug trafficking. දැන් ලංකාවේ drug trafficking problem එකක් නැද්ද? මත්ද්‍රව්‍ය ප්‍රහාණය problem එක. එතකොට ලංකාවේ money laundering problem එකක් නැද්ද? That is also because of corruption. Money laundering කියන්නේ money in Sri Lanka goes up and down without being surfacing officially in the government or in the books. So no, they do the deals without actually paying anything for the country. So then human trafficking, is it not happening? People have been going from various countries to get transplants done, for example, in Sri Lanka for money and so on. But other kinds of trafficking may be happening. I don't know a lot of detail about it, but it is happening. So these things are promoted by corruption. So if you look at the corruption index, that's a corruption index, and then this is published in 2022. I couldn't find any recent ones. The green ones are mostly countries that has least corruption, and you can see green countries over here, and one country in Africa, and also one or two countries very here in South America. All the others are green. Look at our color, which is red near somewhere here. So our corruption index is very low, saying that we have very high corruption levels. And then our very friendly countries that we are working with, the government has been working with, are also in the same kind of category. So we can't expect a lot of good things coming from any of them. But if you want to address corruption, which is systemic, anti-corruption effort must take systems approach beyond targeting individual bad apples. Now, trying to target individual bad apples is the political rhetoric at the moment. Everybody is talking about, we must get the money back, we must get the stolen money back, and so on. But actually speaking, you have to correct the system and not really go behind just bad apples. But the problem is, with anti-corruption inventions need to be flexible, politically responsive, and designed with potential backlash in mind. Now, although many are talking about fixing corruption in our political platforms, they don't really say what corruption or how it will be done. So now, this is where the crunch is. And I'm going to talk about the political corruption, because the Aragale that happened in 2022 wanted a system change and also address corruption. Now, first of all, let's see, are we improving? Now, in April 22, when there was a debt crisis and we were declared as bankrupt, we were in debt $51 billion US. Now, since then, within the last 2 years, we have not made any debt repayments, no foreign debt repayments. Then the domestic restructuring was done using the pensions fund. So the people lost their savings in the pensions fund. And about 1/3 of the funds was liquidated, in the sense, lost the value in the way it's been done with interest, etc. Have we seen any big public benefit during this time? Not really. For the last 2 years, we've had more taxes being imposed and more difficulty for normal people. And the president now say the Sri Lanka is no longer bankrupt. But if you look at the data, what does it say? Foreign debt restructuring is happening, but at very high cost. And no real negotiations have gone wrong. And we recently hear that we may be paying a lot more in 2028. So, but look at this. Our debt is now USD 100 billion. We have not done anything for the public, that's obvious, but our debt has doubled within the 2 years, and we don't know where this money is gone. Basically, we can't see it in the country. Now, look at this bucket. It's got lots of holes and the water is falling out. If you think this bucket is our public money pot, then nobody has really said anything about these holes or how to fix them. Instead, we've been taking loans and loans and loans to fill it continuously. And then not much increase in productivity, education and energy, etc. We have not done much to increase productivity of the country. So basically, we've been filling this with mostly loans. Then think about who is the spending authority of this public money? Is anybody spend this other than the politicians? So the whole system is politicized. Is the politicians who are authorizing the spending of this money. And everyone, personally, the people whom you have seen as ministers or local MPs and so on, when they try to spend public money, they will somehow try to keep a share for them. Now, that is what these holes are showing. So what politicians are doing to take a share of this public money, every one of them is doing that. And these holes, they have not sealed them. They are trying to increase it as much as possible. And that is still happening. And then take some examples. Most people are interested in imports and all the ministers wants to import something. Why? The commissions can be parked outside and nobody sees them. And no interest to enhance Sri Lanka productivity. That obviously is there. There's no money for education, no money for any help with the small enterprises and so on. No. Say what has happened to, for example, steel industry. In Sri Lanka, steel industry started, I think it's 1960 or something, and then the China started it 1958. Now see the steel industry in China, which is the world leader now in this year, and we are come to nothing. Tire industry, our tire industry was developing, nothing's happened. Then the sugar industry, paper industry, all that has gone down because politicians are not interested in developing those because they don't get much money from it. Then most projects are overestimated. For example, highway construction, we have paid 3 times the cost that will be needed in a developed country to do the same highways. So we can see how much money we have taken as loans at the expense of the public liability to form highways. And Mattala, we compared, the Mattala expense is about 3 times of going to the moon when you compare to what money was spent in India to send a flight to south of the moon. If we had invested in something like that, we would have at least had a couple of satellites now that is earning money for us. So imagine the way it's been spent. Then the scams, there are endless number of scams. I don't need to list them, but you all know this is still happening. And the political middleman is there, where everywhere if you go to say, they might say, oh, you have to get this person's signature or this person's permission, or if anything you want get done, that's another middleman somewhere planted by someone. So who is paying for all this? It's the public. They are really hard hit. Their indirect taxes have increased, direct taxes have increased, and they have to pay for cost of corruption done by the politicians. Then the loan repayments also, they have to fund it. Debt restructuring, they have to fund it. And all the state enterprises that are losing, they have to fund it. And then they have to pay for the middleman. Now, can the public survive this? But unfortunately, none of the political leaders at the moment fighting for the next position is actually talking anything about this at all. So if you take the parliamentarians who are there, they all enjoy all the perks, duty-free cars, allowances, pensions, etc. They don't quarrel that at all. Even recently they've given the cars and everything. No talk, none of them. They just quietly take them. then bring out arguments only after locking the gate and the horse has jolted. That means when there's something is happening, they don't talk about it. They wait until it happened and the gate is closed and then start shouting. That is what generally the opposition is doing. So they have been in that practice for years and years. Even now, in political platforms, they are exposing things. But why now? The house has gone and the gate is closed. But just for fun to get some kind of deception to us as the nation. No one talks about election system change, which is highly irregular with no equality for vote. This is not talked about because the constitution and the election system is in favor of them. So nobody can enter the race. Say, for example, there is a presidential election at the moment, but independent candidate like you and me, if you want to contest, no, we can't get our name as an independent candidate. Nobody can. Only if you are representing one of these parties can go as a nominee to the presidential election, or if you are a member in this position who is an elected member. So that means now the presidential election is reserved for this lot, not for anybody else. So you can see where we are having the problem. Directly and indirectly responsible for our bankruptcy and ongoing political corruption. All of these know this corruption, but they don't say much about it. That is why we must work to get all these 2 to 5 must go. But it cannot happen because now the presidential election is represented by this lot and nobody else from outside. And then what can we do? We'll have to elect the same lot. So why is this continuing? This corruption is continuing because the civil administration is totally politicized, because all the ministries are approved or under the thumb of the ministers, and then they will somehow net some money from all the public money that is being spent. State-owned enterprises have parachuted directors and so on. That's totally politicized. So their inefficiency is irrelevant because the government budget will fund them. All lessors need to be paid by the public. Who has to pay for this? Public has to pay for it. There's no checks and balances in the constitution because it's being removed. So all the politicians, once elected, they have total impunity. And the government business is private business. That is what is happening. Exploiting the people. And that is our corruption. So we got now, as the normal ordinary citizens, got a wall that is not visible, but that is because of the tinkered constitution, keeping all us in one clan as very poor, even the middle class, try finding how to live. Whereas you got this 2 to 5 living in luxury because of all the money that is coming. Plus, there is a 1% of our people who gets 30% of the national wealth and income. Also on that side, through various means of association with this 2 to 5. So that is our current situation. It's very difficult to break through this invisible wall to the other side. And then we keep copying these messages coming from same people on this side to see which side to go. So basically, that is one side, we are on the other side, and that will remain even after the election. So we have our problems. We have a public money problem. Requirement is massively overinflated. So we are paying for it because there's so much political corruption. Governance, election system and the governance system is corrupt, and that cannot be mended without getting into the government. But that is not possible, as I told you. Even in the election, we cannot have a representative. Manipulated and ignored. Constitution is either manipulated or it's ignored. We can see it in the practice. And the law and order is hanging from a thread because they are also trying hard to maintain an independent law and order system. So we are in this kind of situation, and the ordinary citizens must united get involved to change this political landscape. But it's hard But without doing that, we are not going to see any reasonable outcome. So that's where I will stop, and I will ask Fazaheel, Faizer, you're there.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
there. Can you hear me?
yeah. I made you co-host, so you can. You said
Okay.
you had a presentation as well, isn't it?
Yes, let me do the sharing.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute, please. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we'll wait a bit. It will come. Yeah, we got it. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, we got it there. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Chula, for asking me to speak about this today. Uh, Chula said the subject that we are going to discuss is political corruption. Corruption comes from all forms, like you said. Corruption is a dishonest behavior by those in positions of power. And this can be even a father who can be corrupt against one of his child, right? Not giving the right inheritance, things like that. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is political corruption. Some parts may have been touched by Chula, but let me go through the other parts with you. What is political corruption? Chula made that definition clearly in his presentation also well, but its use of powers by government officials or their network contacts for illegitimate private gain. Forms of corruption, Chula spoke about it: bribery, lobbying, extortion, cronyism, nepotism, poachierism, patronage, influence, peddling, graft, embezzlement. Corruption may also facilitate criminal enterprises. Chula also touched upon this regarding drug trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking. So corruption has not only one element, it can have many elements. And we will touch upon that in the next few slides. Over time, corruption has been defined definitely, for example, in a simple context, while performing work for a government or as a representative. You can see this in the US. There's a lot of lobbyists. What do? They collect money from business companies and they lobby against a candidate who's going to win. For what? To get favors and perks and kickbacks and whatever they want to make their company a successful, forgetting the people. A gift is seen as an intention to seek certain. A lot of people, if you look at Imran Khan, he just got a gift and he is paying the price because he got a gift. And then he sold it, right? So again, these kind of corruptions can creep into just to even to entrap a politician. So corruption can come in a form of a person wants to make money, or a person wants to corrupt that society or government, or to send that politician who think is a threat to jail. So there are various forms of intentions that corruptions may bring in to society. What is institutional corruption? Certain states, institutions may constantly act against the interests of the public. And this is what is happening to us. Chula has pointed out beautifully on the slide before, how only the fortunate makes money. The less fortunate is deprived from health, education, all these kind of things. Such as by misusing public funds. It's our taxpayers' money that has been used for all the corruption that is happening right now. It is not that they are getting, and they spend it, but they cannot get the money back through creating jobs, foreign revenue or things. So at the end of the day, like Chula presented, we are the ones who are spending out of our pockets for their mistakes. Bribery is an overt criminal act by individuals, may not necessarily be evident because this is very done under the carpet. Everything is slime. Nobody knows. It's connection, it's passed under the table, it's done so, or they manipulate the law well because they have teamed up with the best cream lawyers who represent them, and they give them what is the best way to steal because they are getting a part of the loot, what they're taking. What is political corruption? An illegal act by an office holder institutes political corruption only if the act is directly related to their official duty, is done color of law, or involves trading in influence. So this is what I see as a political corruption in government looks like, or can be defined as. The activities that constitute illegal corruption differ depending on the country or jurisdiction. Now, what happens in Sri Lanka may not happen in South America. What happens in USA may not happen in China. So corruption takes various forms because of the ideology or the visions or the nature of what the government has planned to make money out of. Like our government wants to make money of other things, not farming, not education, not technology, things like that. So they want to bring cars and make money. They want to do other things. Activities constitute illegal corruption differ depending on other situations of the country. Religious, they want only a certain group of people to want to become rich. Business-wise, only certain business companies like governments want to make money. So they put a lot of money into that corruption. Or defense, like we have the big deal, right? So somebody wants, they know by buying a plane, they can make a lot of commissions out of it. So it can be, itemized to certain sectors, For instance, some political funding practices that are illegal in one place may be legal in another place. So casinos may be legal in one country, casinos may be not legal in the Middle East. So they think, okay, this is a good way of having a casino here. Then comes vice activities, then comes all these things, commissions and whatever it is, or illegal money, and also to clean their dirty money. So it depends. Again, corruptions can creep in through those ends also. In some cases, government officials have broad and defined powers. And that is the biggest power in failure in Sri Lanka, because the executive is controlling everything. And that is not correct. And people have been sidelined year after year by bringing new legislation that will protect them and benefit them only, not the general public who vote for them. So we are just known as citizens as Mr. Tick only. We only give a tick every 5 years and then we go back. And they have the paradise for the next 5 years, make us pay more when they come to the next term. So the other one is the worldwide bribery alone is estimated to involve $1 trillion US. Imagine $1 trillion US. How many poorer nations can be built from this? How many nations can come out of poverty, hunger? So what is cryptocracy? Cryptocracy is clearly defined. A state of understanding of political corruption is known as cryptocracy, literally meaning ruled by thieves. It's not only politicians, police officers, government, military officials, customs, immigration, everybody who is even sitting in a counter wants to make a buck because his welfare is not looked after, he's not paid a good salary, there is no proper check and balance systems in place. Definition of corruption, it has been, in my view, the corruption is a difficult concept to define, but a proper definition of corruption requires a multidimensional approach, The mutually popularized the oldest dimension of corruption as the decline by virtue among political officials and the citizenry. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to continue. That's how I feel it. Consequences on politics, administration, and institutions. Well, when we go somewhere to get things done, if we pay somebody, we are on first of the line. Our paperwork is handled. We are not given a number. We are not allowed to follow the approach. So again, corruption creeps up even at the lower level. Consequence on the economy. We are paying the price, high taxes. Chula mentioned all the taxes that are coming in. Is that the only tax that we are going to pay? We are going to pay more taxes then, right? And in addition to more we delay, the more interest is going to be. So we are going to pay taxes or to pay those interest off. People don't looking at other aspects of paying the loan, looking at banks that gives a low interest rate and a quicker or a longer time period to pay. We are only going to banks that are giving high interest rate and even want to control our national legislations. Sometimes IMF, people like that, they want to control nations, poorer nations. They want countries to go bankrupt because they can control them then. They can get their like LGBTQ and other agendas passed in their governments because they can make legislations. They will say this is priority. We want you to reform transparency. We want you to reform corruption. These angles. So it's happening if you look at it indirectly, but very slowly. We are not seeing it. So we have to read the fine print very carefully in every agreement, that whether it's the Paris Club or whether it's a Chinese bank, what are the agreement? What are the finer points? They are not divulging these finer points to us. We have to look at it. What are the things that are going to affect the citizen in the long run? Environmental and social effects. Yes, these also can have consequences for us. They are going to bring a windmill project in Manna. What about the birds? What about wildlife? What about the ocean graphics or ocean? Anything going to be affected environmental wise? Have we done research? We just give a project just without any transparency, without any tendering. Is that correct? We have to look at it. What is the long-term impact? Effects on humanitarian aid, right? If they only fund certain countries and not look a blind side to others, humanitarian aids can be affected, right? Countries are suffering, like people in Houthis, for example, they went through a war and people were suffering because of that war, but nobody cared about their plight and their things. So Sri Lankan went through a war, but we never had such a big debt during the wartime. Our commanders, our leaders at that time didn't have such a big debt in our hands. But in the last 15 years, all these debts came after the war with no national security issue. Why? Because these people who we voted are corrupt. So indirectly, it affected the people. They didn't have gas, they didn't have fuel, they didn't have even a proper meal to eat. So it affects humanitarian aid within ourselves. So we needed the aid. But who did that? It was our politicians. Effects on health. We have seen it. Thank God Kehelia has been arrested. We see justice coming back. People are now upholding the rule of law from the judiciary side. We have to be proud because they are our safeguard and they are executing the law, and we have to back them. If a president goes and calls the judges cannibals and equals them to that, I don't know what else we can say about our president. Can we trust him in the future? Effects on education. The children, the teachers who are the core of the nation, they are the ones who bring up the next generation of leaders, businessmen, whatever, entrepreneurs into the system. What are we doing? I feel that our teachers must be paid the same price as the ministers because they are the ones who are bringing up every child, no matter which faith or religion you bring. So teachers are a key, and we have to as citizens stand by for the rights of our teachers and professors in universities and in schools. Other areas, public safety, trade union, police, corruption, all these things happening. Trade unions is a mess, to tell you frankly, in Sri Lanka, because people are the ones who suffer because we are losing revenue every time somebody strikes, right? Now, as long as the strike is peaceful, it does not interrupt the economy, you can execute the civil rights. But corruption, sometimes people use such unions to disrupt the country. That also affects the nation as we as citizens. We have to tell certain things is no, certain things are yes to do. Types of corruption, Chula touched upon it: bribery, trading in influence. If I know you, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That attitude has to stop. We all have to be deserved as merit. We have to be served as Sri Lankans equally, fairly, justice to everybody. Doesn't matter who you are. Patronage, nepotism, cronyism, gombism, and patriotism, which also Chula touched upon, electrical fraud, embezzlement, kickbacks, unholy alliance, involvement in organized crime. Before I touch upon unholy alliance, people give votes for politicians who represent a certain party. Once they get into power, they quickly jump to another party. Is this allowed? Because the people gave mandate to that particular person, to that particular party. Should we encourage the jumping of parties after the vote has been cast? We have to look at it, whether we need reforms in those areas. Because the politician is only jumping for his benefit. He's not, because the people gave mandate based on that particular party. So we have to look at it, unholy alliances, which is happening under the table, and which has been happening with SLPP, UNP, and naming parties here, because we can see that during our time. If you look at who is H.R. Jayawardena, he started the first betrayal and corruption way before independence. That was JR's grandfather. Okay, if you look at his history, you will come to know how he went against his own fellow Sri Lankan by bringing an Indian, Mr. Ponnambalam, to contest. And I'm sure Ranjan will highlight that history to us because I was not from that era. So corruption didn't start after independence. It started way before independence from the UNP family. It's H.A. Jayawardena. So it's a long period of time. Even during the British colonial rule, we had corruption of our own people. Involvement of organized crime. All these names that are coming from Dubai, other places, have you heard of them before? Were they long-standing, like Saradil or Dutu Kamunu or whatever it is, you know? These people, new names. Kanchipan Imran, I have never heard of him. You know, where did they come from? Who created them? Who influenced them? Who are looking after their interests? It is all politically connected, right? So a lot of us are very shocked to see. Those days we had Sotti Upali and other people in our generation, I suppose, you know. Premadasa used to have those people under them, right? But killings, have we seen like American style killings happening in our country right now? Right? It's people are just not worthless. They can just come on a motorcycle and kill somebody if they want. Guns for hire, I call them, you know. So organized crime is rampant. This has to be tackled. And this is the paramount of the police. Even the military can be utilized for this, you know, especially the military police. To stop such crime, because the guys who are committing crimes are ex-military soldiers or soldiers without a job or deserters. So we have to work together to fight crime as citizens. Condition favorable for corruption? It's very vast and diverse. Some researcher indicates that political corruption is contagious. It is. It's like a disease. One person gets the taste and it just goes haywire. Because everybody knows the fast way to make a buck, right? By a good example is the customs. During the COVID period, everything was digitized, so less corruption. Soon as COVID finished, they go back to manual processing. Corruption starts. bribery starts, no accountability, no transparency. So digitization actually stops corruption to a certain extent. But what happens soon after the COVID, our government officials in customs have gone back to manual processing. Government corruption is the highest echelons of the government. Also take advantage of corruption or embezzlement from the state treasury. Bond scam is a good example of this. We call it a scam. Has it been proven? Well, nobody wants to go on that path. Everybody doesn't talk about it. You know, oh, we were in a difficulty. Ranil came, got us tax relief, tax breaks. He's good. Now let's get him up. What happened to the past cases? What happened to past audits? Do we go through the past audit and say what are the findings? What are the corrective actions that needs to be done? Nothing has been done. People only talk about what's happening, like Chula said now. They don't care. It's for this moment. We are not 2 steps ahead. We are 2 steps behind, you know, in any process. So we wait till things happen, like Chula said, that, you know, and then we react. We need to be more proactive than reactive in our lives. Members of government can't take advantage of natural resources. For example, we are blessed with gems, fuel, wind, farming, agriculture-wise, we have so much of natural resources, beautiful landscape, tourism. Why don't we get these things and publicize and get more revenue out of these things? Sell our country to somebody else instead of people coming and taking over our country. We will be in demand. For example, places like Saudi Arabia, they don't have even vegetation. If we just export vegetables, like Lulu Hypermart, you know, they did for whole of Middle East, we can make money off, you know, our own resources. You know, so people have to get, experts have to come in from these areas, and experts have to be brought in. Our own people who are outside, who are now experts, who have exposed to other countries' systems, they should come back and contribute and grow this country to the next level. Number of corrupt governments have enriched themselves via foreign aid. Can you tell me a good example of this? Tsunami, right? Mahinda Rajapaksa. So, yeah, people are devastated and being killed and no properties, no food to eat. Our politicians scam the money that they get for relief duties. Why? Who is doing it? It may be not even the president. It may be just the clerk. It may be just the minister. It may be the secretary. But the buck has to stop somewhere, right? So we have to look at every process each person is doing in offices and see where the corruptions can take place and where we can plug it in. A corruption dictatorship typically results in years of general hardship. Well, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will have to pay back the loans that the politician enjoyed. And we have to sacrifice 3 generations to pay back. Is it worth it? Our grandchildren will say, my grandfather didn't do anything. He was sitting and just watching what's happening. How are we going to answer that in our graves to our grandchildren or to a God or to our creator? So we have to understand in the long term, we have to have a decent government, a government with integrity, and we have to have a plan. Whether the plan materializes now or even in 10 years' time, we have to infiltrate every political party one by one and bring the change from bottom up. Otherwise, it won't happen. Let it be from provincial council even, but it has to be infiltrated to every single party. And then we come up from there. Because if we start becoming one party, then we are just only isolating ourselves. We need to spread out to every single party and then bring the change from there. That's what I feel. In addition, corruption dictates routinely ignoring economic and social problems in their quest to master over more wealth and power, ideally creating bigotry, hatred against other, putting different faction groups to fight each other while they rob the country. That's what happened. After the war, they started in bigotry type of activities. So keep people fighting each other, keep parties fighting each other, executive makes money, and then we end up paying the bill. Judiciary corruption. There is corruption in the judiciary. The firing of the Mrs. I forget her name, the former Supreme Court Chief Justice, was done in a very unprofessional manner by, I think, Shirani Bandaranaike, if I'm not correct, or I don't forget her name, was by the Rajapaksa regime, was very, very unethical. They want to put their people in places of judiciary because they can do whatever corruption they want. Look at the number of cases that has been taken out from prosecution, 43 cases. Recently, I was told, has been saying due to technical error. What is technical error? Where is our AJ? Where is our prosecution department who are looking into everything, fine prints, and before we present the case or charge somebody? So the due diligence have never been done. That is why we are not getting conviction. But thank God things are coming back in order. Look at Hirunika. She's been arrested for abducting somebody while the guy who destroys the parliament is walking away. He even eats the police officers with chili powder. What about the guy who slapped a porter in the airport? Where's the criminal charges against him? So this is all politically motivated because they are a threat. Whoever is a threat is eliminated. So we need to stand by those people to ensure that justice is served and give them the right. Judicial corruption can be difficult to completely eradicate. True, but we have to eradicate it somehow. We have to send undercover agents sometimes to sit in a courtroom and see what the judges are doing. A lot of countries did that, right? They send moles just to see how the government operates. Let me tell you, Harry Jayawardena, when he ran Sri Lankan Airlines, he used to go as a passenger and stand on the ticket line. And if he feels that he was not served properly or the others were not served, he will immediately fire the person behind them. That's how he turned the airline to running a profit to a certain extent. He had to be a little bit ruthless, but we have to have somebody like that to correct our people. So sometimes we have to take some stern stance in order to change things. But in time, we can relax those regulations. Opposition for corruption. How can we? Mobile telecommunication radio broadcast has helped us tremendously. Thanks to bloggers today, thanks to social media, thanks to free media, free press around the globe, we are able to send the message of the individual who has been oppressed or who has been taken for a ride. Those days, we cannot voice. We have to go to the government newspaper and write an article whose editor is politically connected. Sometimes he will not even publish a story. But today, thanks to social media, everybody has a voice, from a poor man to the rich man. So we need to use these modes to fight corruption as much as possible. In India, the Anti-Corruption Bureau fights against corruption, and a new ombudsman bill has called Jana Lokpal bill is being prepared. We need to have an anti-corruption bill. We need to have an independent anti-corruption committee, an anti-corruption organization. Hong Kong, far as I remember, was very, very corrupt in the 70s. And it was bought out by forming up the ICAC by then governor of Hong Kong. Many countries were corrupt. So we need to look at how we have to establish a system to bring this out. And how we do about it is going through every party. Every party, we have to be infiltrated and we have to doctor our views into them, because this is how we want it. This is what we are looking for in our party, or this is what I want for my country. A series of anti-corruption standards and setting instruments was sent to Europe by the OECD. Europe was corrupt too. Don't think they weren't. They were highly corrupt at one time, but they came out of the system, right? So now even the Prime Minister of UK can be held. Hong Kong had these chief executives sent to jail because of corruption, right? Pakistan had Imran Khan, maybe it's trumped up charges, but he was taken in, right? We don't know whether he's innocent or guilty, but he had gone through the system. So we have to have a system that we bring. Just by putting Kehelia cannot satisfy the human aspirations. We need to bring everybody involved into the justice system. Okay. And hopefully our next generation will bring this change. The criminal law of convention and corruption. There are systems and there are laws. Even the UN can help us bring us our stolen money back. Have we approached these people? Can the UN, trace these funds and help nations? Because in order to get the money from foreign countries, you have to have the political will of our leaders, because it's involving other jurisdictions. So we need to have the help of those countries' leaders to recover our assets, stolen properties and funds. That is a long-term plan. But right now, you can charge those politicians, seize their assets, control their bank accounts, and let the case finish until then. Let them suffer for a while. Because if they can seize the property of a drug dealer, then we can seize the property of a politician who's corrupt. That should be the same law applied equally. The Civil Law Convention on Corruption. The additional protocols to criminals law conventions and corruptions. The 20 guiding principles for the fight against corruption. The recommendation on codes of conduct for public officials, which we lack. Even for ministers, we don't have a code of conduct, ethical code of conduct. Right? So even for public officials, there is no ethical code of conduct. They say there is a, when I asked the senior police officer, oh, we have a police standing order. What is the standing order? Show me. Has it been publicized? Are people aware of it? You just make the rules and tell your people only? No, it has to be transparent. Everybody should know what are their rights. How can they report bribery, corruptions, fraud, scams? The recommendation of common rules against corruption in funding political parties and electoral campaigns. There must be limits. Not, if you look at these politicians, only certain business groups hang around these politicians or certain parties. So you know who are the corrupt are. Because that particular company, let's say company A and company B is always with Minister A, right? Or Minister X. And then company C and D is with Minister D, whatever it is, right? So there is always certain groups of people hang around with certain herd of politicians. So you know who is corrupt, which companies are corrupt, who are funding them, who, gamblers or casino owners or whoever, you can say who are behind these people, and how they make their black money, white money through these people, through their companies. So we can put 1 + 1 together. We have to do our own due diligence in certain aspects. Whistleblowers, this I love it. Which company has in their website a whistleblowing link that goes direct to the boss? The top man gets, even the small man doing something wrong is given to him. Same way, if the big man is done, that can be channeled to his boss or his company, everybody, or through the media. So whistleblowing is much needed in Sri Lanka. But what happens if we whistleblow, we get arrested, we are put in jail, then your case is finished? No, we should encourage whistleblowing. whether it's in the military, whether it's in the police, whether it's in civil service. Way forward to stop corruption, political and national will is needed, education and awareness. It is a continuous process. We don't stop now. We go for the next 30, 50 years, it goes on forever. Because everybody must be educated. Even our children, who is 10 years old, has to be taught what is right, what is wrong. What did your government do, and what you have to do in order to stand against that. We have to educate our own children first. We have to put our house in order, right? And we will bring the next few generations to come to bring the change. And they may be one day a leader who will understand the value what was given to them. Set up laws and legal prosecution and allied offenders in hybrid and shift courts. We have 20 years. I had a land case I had to deal for 20 years in Sri Lanka. When I was a little boy, my father had to handle that, right? This is ridiculous. 20 years just to solve a land matter while having all the legal line. And meantime, keeping the land, somebody comes and squatters in that. Then we have to evict that person. Well, where's the law? The political person wants to get that land, they put their thugs to come and take that land. Where's the justice? Right? So we need to stop all this. We need to have digitized deeds. We have to have digitized everything. So no corruption, no file can go missing. Everything is properly documented and archived. We need to look at that. Police to have no executive or legal, police have to have no executive or legislative or outside interference in investigation and judicial processes. Look at what's happening to Shani. One of the greatest investigators, Ravi, they did a fantastic job. But what happened to them? And over 100 officers under them. They were transferred by one man. Right? So if one man can control 100 other officers in a police force, what tells you, we as citizens, what have we done about it? Nothing. We argue for petty things. We fight for petty things. We need to look at the bigger picture. Laws must be applied to everyone, including the president. Why is the president not held accountable while he's in office? Who says he has to be exempted? Why should he be exempted? Why should the speaker went against the constitution on the appointment of the IGP. His vote is not valid. Right? What did he, the speaker is still sitting in the parliament. How can this happen? When we have laws, the laws are there. These people are choosing to ignore the law. Then if a common man breaks the law, he's penalized heavily. But the speaker can. He goes against the constitution. Right? So we need to look at it, because everything that happened in Sri Lanka is because of political corruption. It's nothing else. Nothing else. You look at the history. It's all due to political corruption. The taste was started by the top, was passed down up to the bottom, because everybody started to rob. Rajapakshas gave everybody to rob. Initially, it was on the top. Right? So we need to put an end to this. Mass media, social media, freedom to report crimes. Can we report crime? Who shall we report to crime? Who are we reporting a crime? Is there an independent ombudsman's office? Is there somebody who stands outside the political system as an independent committee we can report it to? We don't have that system, right? In other countries, we have ICAC, right? You can even complain against a judge. You can even complain against a lawyer, because sometimes lawyers, they take money from the opposition party and they lose your case purposefully because they make money. Right? So where is the justice served for the guy who's spending money? So we have to stop. The buck has to stop in everybody of us, including the judiciary. Disclosure of assets, income, criminal records, wealth records verified by every 2 years, because we have to check background checks. We just don't do it one time. We have to do it every 2 years or every 3 years, because you can get a criminal record within that 2 years when you're in power. Airport security goes through heavy vetting, but not politicians. They are the smugglers who bring illegal goods to the country. Why aren't they vetted? So where do you have to lead by example. So corruption has to stop. If the president says, the buck stops with me. A US president was very famous on that quote. So the buck has to stop with the president. And then we as citizens, it has to stop with our family members and families. That's how we work it from both sides to eradicate corruption in our land. Set up a CAPO office, complaint against police officers. Is there any office like that in Sri Lanka? As far as I know, no. If a police officer is found corrupt, we should be able to complain. In Hong Kong, you have the ICAC department to investigate and prosecute even a minister, right? So we have to have systems like that. And hopefully in time, if we work now, we can. And Leeds or other organizations, we have to join hands and infiltrate all these parties and work together to bring that change, because we cannot do it alone. We are one human. We are dealing with a nation or beyond the nations, right? Because India may be influencing our government officials. China may be influencing the CIA, the Mossad, the RAW. All these people are influencing our people. So we need to go in all fronts. Reward mechanism, a very important thing. Even in private companies, if somebody gives some information that leads to a successful prosecution and that person gets a sentence, even give part of that money to that person. You get more people coming forward to report crime. We don't have a reward mechanism, how to thank people for their honesty and their integrity, right? So crimes must be reported, corruption must be reported, everything that is unethical has to be reported. That's how it has to start. Zero interference from outside in all cases, especially from the executive. The executive should not interfere with the legislative. The legislative and executive should not interfere with the judiciary or other committees. They must have their independence. No more the president coming to parliament, taking his privilege coverages under the parliament and saying things against the judiciary. That's wrong. He's the leader and a lawyer. He should set standards and he must go. I'm sorry to say. So I will stop here. It was Harry Truman who said the buck stops here. So hopefully I was enlightened. I did it a small presentation. I wanted to keep it as small. Chula, you touched most of the subject. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you very much, Fazaheel, for outlining all that and then particularly highlighting our own responsibilities in trying to get this corrected. So yes, great, thank you. Already 2 people have raised their hands. If you bring your slides down, you'll be able to see more people. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think Basil Fernandez raised hands first. Basil, you can go first. Basil.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation. So please bear with me if I approach it in a little different way.
Sure.
When I was listening, I asked myself, will anybody who is listening to this audience going to disagree with anything that both of you are telling and some things that we have said in the past? In other words, are we not confining ourselves just to preach to a already converted, and that raising another question: is there something more by people who know Now, clearly, both of you have a very good understanding of the problem. And I'm sure that many of the people who are listening to this also has an understanding. Do we have a further role to develop in order to try to help to resolve these problems? For example, please don't misunderstand if I quote this. The Einstein once said that, the madness is to do the same thing and to expect the different results. It can also be said to be saying the same thing and keep on saying that, expecting different results. We are a large area of agreement, but yet the problem is terribly there. We are like people who are in hell, complaining that this is all bad, and that perhaps there are a better way of doing things. Can there be at least a part of these discussions directed towards concrete suggestions, which we can gradually develop? Not that we will have a complete suggestion overnight, but that we can gradually develop certain practical suggestions which we can take to the people, which we can take to the others, and say, why not try? And in order to illustrate this, let me give you a few examples. As you know, the president tried to extend the term of office of the Attorney General, obviously for very corrupt reason. The publicly discussed motive was that to keep him somehow till the Chief Justice retired in December, and to appoint him with the hope that he can get whatever he wants done there. Now, during this time, several websites, talk shows, as well as people intervened severely and got that stopped. And that had an influence in the Constitutional Council, and the Constitutional Council made sure that he did not get appointed. Now that's one example where concerned groups of people intervene to fight against corruption. The possibility of having one more Mohan Piris or one more Sarath Nanda Silva has a disastrous effect on the system. So this is one example of intervention. Now, another intervention that we could see within the last few weeks, although politically they may be from different shades, and I don't share any particular political view of in favor of any political party, but there were a few things that were impressive. For example, a group of scientists from all over the Sri Lankan scientists from very developed universities holding very high positions, they came together and to discuss how to develop research facilities in order to develop the economy in the future. Now, this showed two things. That first, that they were willing to participate in a process of change. Secondly, that they had the competence to do that, and that they were giving ideas of what can be done. Now, a third example was, once again, politically it may be different, but a group of retired policemen, or in a large number, few thousands, got together as a one group with the view to fight for restoration of the rule of law in the country. Now, this is a historic approach because normally dividing the people and the police in a very big way had been a game that has been used all the time. Now, all these things show an attempt not just to talk about corruption, but finding ways to intervene on corruption. Now, one of the issues that will have a decisive impact on the future of corruption issue is whether we are going to have the presidential election or not. Now, the main strategy through which the corruption has been entrenched in Sri Lanka is the idea of 2/3 majority for the ruling party in parliament. That this is why Jayawardena was able to carry out his program, and this has continued from various ways, either directly hitting the number or buying the number. Whichever it is, time has come when this has to be broken. And this can be done only when there is an election. So therefore, taking what active parts can be taken in order to ensure that a free and fair election is held and held in time. Now that will have, in other words, we are not going to overcome the corruption problem just overnight, but we can open up avenues to go there. The taking steps to create entry points by which we can enter into a fight on the whole issue of corruption. Political corruption is a far more complex problem in the modern world than merely corruption of people or some system. If you want to know what the real depth of corruption is, I suggest that you read 1984 by George Orwell. That's the kind of structure of development of a political system which doesn't consider corruption as corruption. It's a corruption of way of doing business in that system. And that's the kind of system that has begun to develop in a number of countries. And this is a global problem. And we, from 1978, we have been having our 1984. So this is a very, very deep-rooted political problem. It's not just only corruption is a political issue. Our whole problem is a political problem. The kind of system problem is a political system problem. So having more discussions into how to develop suggestions for the future. Various countries, it may be different points of view. It may not be that anybody having any particular solution that we have to accept. There may be many solutions, but at least the positive discussions on what to do. At least if we can involve part of this discussion, if we have 2 hours, at least half of the time for the present and the future of what to do. And I think that will be helpful to put the knowledge that you are talking about into practice.
Thank you, Basil.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Basil. I think I'll probably start talking about developing a blueprint on this, because what to do is something that needs to be written up. So we'll come back to that. There are 2 other people raise hands, but I will contact with you once we are developing this. And I think next is Lasil. Lasil, are you there, Lasil? Lasil?
Yeah, I'm there. Thanks, Chula. I was a little late. I only was able to listen to Faiz. Maybe that was also halfway through. Actually, now both Basil and Faiz, raised certain very valid issues. Actually, ultimately now, Basil said political corruption is a huge issue, and that involves political whatever problems. Basically, looking at the big picture, all what I want to say now, as citizens, we face all the consequences and we bear the whole lot of problems, basically economic, social, political, all those issues. Now, having having said that, how do we come to our own conclusions? We need corrective measures. How do you try and organize or get things organized in order to improve the situation? Now, my big problem, as we always discuss, is this is a system failure. Even Basil said the same thing. We need whatever to understand that these are problems in the system. And how did ultimately they break down the entire system? Now, we have to understand our problem basically lies with the politicians, because it is the politicians who will have to enact laws to fight corruption. That's how they did it even in other countries. But having created laws, having enacted laws, unfortunately, in some countries, you can't enforce those laws properly to maybe get hold of corrupt politicians or get hold of corrupt public officials or even businessmen, because this is kind of a situation where a large group, I would say, maybe involved in with political power, they manipulate the whole thing. Actually, this kind of despotic rulers eventually, I would say, uh, you know, in different groups, they use everything for their own benefit. They don't allow the laws to sort of create situations where the public sector eventually will be able to deliver the goods. Now, let me say it this way. We know, even Faiz said, sometimes we might have to be very stern. Yes, we need to be very stern because you can't do it. Now, when you have to repair kind of a system which is now in bad shape, it will be very important for us to understand our problem is even bringing or disciplining the entire public sector to reach out these goals. How do we do it is a big problem. Like what I said, we may have to create laws. Unfortunately, after having created laws, if it doesn't happen, that is the biggest problem. My way of looking at the whole thing, even Ranil at one stage in 2015, he spoke of good governance. All what we need is to run the entire public sector, all the institutions properly, so that we will be able to, end of the day, stop corruption. In order to stop corruption, all what we need, like what we discussed here, the police, maybe the attorney general, the judiciary, all will have to be strengthened. Actually, it is a kind of thing that we need to do, state building. What is state building? State building for that purpose is, strengthening the institutions, basically to achieve those goals, maybe economic, maybe political, maybe social, all that. Now, in order to do that, we have a problem. What is the problem? I would say the problem, the truism, is, democratic sort of destruction. I would say democracy is not working because the parliament has completely neglected their role. Now, in order to do that, all what we need basically is a set of changes. We have to look at the whole thing. As people, we also have a duty to ensure that when we elect the people, particularly to parliament to start with, there has to be a set of good people sent to parliament. But why are we not in a position to do that? Like what I said, a small group of people who are holding on to political power, let's say the political parties, they don't dominate the right type of people for nomination. They don't give nomination to the right type of people. So this is a big problem. All what I say is we have to understand, we have to know from where do we start. Now, unfortunately, if we don't understand the problem properly, where the problem lies, or where the problems are, we will never be able to correct the situation. All what we need to understand, the problem again lies with even with the political parties, because political parties have changed the entire system from the 70s. Now, look at the big picture about the elections. Elections ultimately don't permit, to elect the right type of people. All what they do is they have taken complete control of the political parties and the party leaders. Look at Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ranil Wickremesinghe has been in the party leadership for, so many years, I would say for several decades, and he continues. And he has the hold. It's the same thing even with Mahinda Rajapaksa. We have to change the political culture. Unless we change the political culture, there's no way out. Those are the issues that we have to tell the people, that unless we correct or at least introduce new laws in order to change the political system, there's no way out. We have to do it one by one. We have to do it systematically. A lady called Mary Lee, I forget her full name, she had said, all what we need is not really good governance, good enough governance, right? We have to establish a system how to start with good enough governance, because then only we can slowly, gradually develop all that and then try and ensure the institutions are working perfectly well to reach out to those goals. Unless you do that, there is no way out. Now, with regard to appointments in the public sector, with regard to day-to-day services, improving the services, all that needs a lot of concentration, a lot of attention, and all that needs to be begin. We have to start all that from the parliament itself. So for that purpose, now what we have been thinking over a period of time, look at other countries. How did they do that? Look at even China. Now, when Deng Xiaoping was elected to run China, he started with a lot of big things. He was very tough with regard to even say when it came to social issues. Now, look at Tiananmen Square. Whatever said and done, the big picture, we have to understand. The biggest problem is we have really not understood what the problem is, and in order to achieve all those, I think the best thing is to discuss the crux of the issue, the basic problems we are facing. Unless you change the politicians who are running governance, because we need at least, like Mary Lee Grindle, she had said, all what we need is good enough governance. Let's start from there. Let's discuss further on those issues. I'm sorry I was late, and I would like to say only that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Lasil. I just want to touch one thing. Yes, you're absolutely right. And even what Basil said was absolutely right. But first of all, what are we doing to ourselves within our families? We have to correct within ourselves and then move out. Let me tell you a good example. A child told his father, Tati, you cannot smoke here because there is a sign, right? Father realized the son is advising him. So he didn't smoke because there was a sign. This comes to awareness. Now the corruption issue will be spoken continuously for our lifetime. It won't end just because change came. It will continue. Even a child. So we will train that child, nurture that child to bring the change from the bottom. And they will become future leaders. When they sit on the seat, they know what is right and wrong. So how we bring about the change is from bottom up, as well as from the top. We elect good leaders. Once we infiltrate these people and we give our way or advise them the right way. That is one way. But your processes, yes, it's a long-term thing. We all have to join hands.
So,
it's yeah.
It's not a long-term thing. As you said, it's a two-way process. You have to start from the bottom up. I like to quote this way. Even in other countries, look at Singapore, look at China, right? there has been corruption, like what you said, even in Europe. So what did they do? They reformed. They were able to sort of build up the state structure, and they started from the top and again from the bottom as well. You know, you have to give education, educate the children, all that. Actually, these two processes have to go simultaneously. What is more important is to ensure that the state is rebuilt. Thank you.
Thanks, Lara.
Okay,
Point taken.
we actually got limited time. I got only 40 minutes left. We have 4 people raised their hands. So shall we listen to them? Ranjan, next, please.
Thank you, Chula and Faizer, for dissecting corruption meticulously. We must now concentrate on the action side. We all know the problem now. What shall we do? That is what is important. I think, see, in 1970, 5 parliamentarians, among them ministers, were found guilty of corruption. What were the corrupt actions? One was found guilty of having taken a sewing machine. Another, some 50 rupees. Then giving appointments. Very small actions of corruption, examples of corruption. The party took no action against them, even after they were found guilty, and it was the succeeding government that took action and disenfranchised them. From 1970, now fast forward to 2024. What is the kind of corruption? Imagine the corruption that is now taking place. It has bankrupted the country. It has bankrupted the country, and no action is being taken, even after the Supreme Court pronounced that 5 or more of them are responsible for the bankruptcy. What does this show? To me, it shows that implementation is very weak. That is why it marched on to this level of bankrupting the country. So what is required is implementation. Actually there are enough and more laws now. But what is required is there is nobody to implement these laws. There is nobody to implement these laws. That is where the weakness lies. So this is a moral issue now. And we need to elect the right people who will implement these laws. We need to elect them to parliament. For this, we need to educate the electorate, the voters. This is what the civil society has got to do. And this is the best opportunity. This is the turning point. Actually, this is the turning point of Sri Lanka. If we fail this time, this country is going to join the ranks of corrupt countries in the world like Haiti, Somalia, Sudan, and Venezuela, Zimbabwe. This is the country is going to be in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjan. You said correctly.
Thank you, Ranjan. We got 3 other people actually raise hands. Next, Nilmini. Yes, Nilmini.
Hi, thank you so much for organizing today's discussion. And I do agree with a lot of what's been said. And your focus is on the political corruption, but the politicians are also people. They were children once. So the problem, it seems to me, is a societal problem, because corruption seems to be endemic in Sri Lanka, whether it's to try and get a kid into school, whether you're trying to get out of a parking ticket, whether you're trying to get out of anything at all. You know, bribery and corruption seems to be everywhere, just about everywhere. But the funny thing is, the laws are there. The laws are very much there. We've signed up to all sorts of international instruments as well, and there are lots of domestic laws, it seems to me. But it is a question of the rule of law not being applied, the equality before law. and enforcement, a sense of ethics, they seem to be absent. And so even in terms of politicians, are there codes of conduct? And if there are for ministers, for politicians generally, and for all the public services, the police, there must be codes of conduct. And the thing is, if they don't comply, then they must be kicked out. But so that's where the enforcement is important. For example, declarations of interests, if there is a, for MPs, and we talked about Singapore earlier on, and they seem to have imposed a culture of meritocracy. For as long as there's no sense of appointing people who know what they're doing, who are capable of doing something, but it's your brother or your relative or your friend who's appointed to a particular thing, then the whole of society breaks down. And so if there's zero tolerance and strict enforcement of the law, then things might progress. So in terms of ethics, as somebody said, it must be bottom-up approach and then top-down approach. So if you've got children being taught ethics and morality and those things in schools, and also more women taking part in these things. So if you've got more engagement, more involvement, more participation of the whole of society, then there might be some future, hopefully, for Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Nilmini. Point taken.
Yeah, thank you, Nilmini. I think you got very good points in relation to top-down and bottom-up approach. We'll try to develop a document to say what actions we can take. And as we say, we really need a political input somewhere. Without that, it's very difficult to initiate anything. So let's work on that and say, yeah, thanks, Nilmini. And now we got Gracian. Gracian is Gracian.
Yep, Chula, Faizer, and ladies and gentlemen. I think we have to take a look at these problems from different levels. First, the meta level. That is about the philosophical and values. Nilmin mentioned that all these people who are grown-ups were children at one point in time. They were through a family, bringing up. They were through a school. And that is the culture, and again, bringing up. Then they were through some educational institutes, universities or technical colleges or whatever it is. Then some of them are members of professions, engineers, lawyers, accountants, doctors, and these teachers, these are the professions that run the country. So if all these adults have gone through teachers, gone through their parents. So this is an endemic situation which has a meta-level problem. Now, Ranjan mentioned about the corruption of the, I'm giving a few points. Ranjan mentioned about the corruption in the 1970s. No, Ranjan, it was in the 1950s. In Bandaranaike's government, there was the corruption. And it was the Talgoda Pitya Commission that was appointed. 6 parliamentarians were found guilty. And Mrs. Bandaranaike, who came into power in 1960, she did not act on Talgoda Pitya report. Finally, it has to be acted upon between 1965 and 70 to expel 2 of the parliamentarians who continued from 1956 onwards until that time. Even before that, during the state council times, 1930s, there was corruption. There was L.M. Pereira Commission on Corruption. And there were state members who were found guilty of corruption. They were expelled. L.M. Pereira later served in the Privy Council. Then, yesterday I was at a gathering. Let me tell you, I was at the quantum leap, the annunciation of the R&D policy of the NPP. After the discussions, I met a couple of lawyers who had come down from Kandy. I put the question to that young lady and gentleman, do the lawyers have a code of ethics? They said yes. Then I asked them to show me that on the net. Is that applicable? How many lawyers have been debarred by the Bar Association for becoming corrupt? 19 million given by the USA to the Bar Association was shared by the president and a few others. So what are they doing with that? So when we talk about the corruption of the politicians, we have to accept that the corruption started in the professions, and it has now, like a cancer, spread to the others. Can the politicians overvalue a project, award it to somebody without the engineers who are in the technical committees, who are there is the CATB, cabinet appointed tender board, which comprises of the secretaries, ministerial secretaries and others, approving that. So we are barking up the wrong tree. So there is meta level, that is the philosophical and broad values. Then the macro level, which is the international level. Now, a foreign investor from India comes and grabs a power project of 484 megawatts at US cents 8 plus, whereas the competitive biddings would yield 4.8 US cents. And the calculated loss to the people is $2.7 billion, calculated by my batchmate and good friend Tilak Siabalapiti. So how does this happen? Then one mentioned about Mohan Selva and Sarathan Selva. And how did all these jumping in the parliament started? Because it was Shirani Das Bandaranaike who gave that permission to open the saloon door. So the corruption started in the professions and in the courts of law, where the constitution was to be interpreted, and they neglected their duty. In 1970, when Sirimau Das Bandaranaike's government came in, she gave quotas to the SLFP and coalition parliamentarians, quotas of jobs. These jobs were teachers and bank officers. And all these MPs took bribes. At that time, it was a hefty bribe, I think about 5,000 rupees a piece. And some of these interviews for teachers were held in guest houses, rest houses for female teachers. In 1970, the teacher who gave a bribe, either in cash or some other kind, and then 30 years later, that teacher becomes a principal. What do you expect from that teacher? So these are fundamental questions. All the things that we say are valid. What Lassil said is, good governance will start from good enough governance. I fully endorse that. Then the other thing is, we have this habit. Even just now I responded to a comment in the Leeds Forum that says, everybody has a price. Well, if you think that you have a price, you can accuse that somebody else has a price. So if you think that you have values, and if you think that you cannot be bought, think that there are other guys who cannot be bought as well. Then the most important thing is the codes of ethics and codes of conduct. If you are in a profession, that's a code of conduct, code of ethics, and each individual member may not be up to that level. That is why the code of conduct is there, code of ethics is there, to govern those members, and those guys who are deficient to prevent them engaging in corruption. So if we want to sort of, have an impact in the country, start from the professions. That is, we have to, take a multi-pronged approach, and we have to start from the professions, put every profession under pressure to honor their code of ethics, and to sack the guys who are violating that. That is one aspect. So it has to be a multi-pronged. I agree fully that you have to have a plan of actions, and as Chula said, I think I have taken enough time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greshan.
Yeah, thank you,
Pointer.
Greshan, for that. Yeah, thank you. Because I think I've got 2 other people waiting, so we need to carry on. Anura, yes, Anura. Anura?
Yes. Let me try to be brief because most of the points have been really addressed. I'll try to just add a few comments. Is that corruption is not only a political issue. Yeah, we should not be throwing this cancer towards the politicians alone. It's a deep-rooted people or societal issue that was probably born by granting preferences to the privileged or the elite, even pre-democracy. We had lived a life where the privileged people were allowed to do any form of crime, fraud, or corruption, and the rest of the people just were helpless. And later it became democratized. I think the only thing we have democratized in Sri Lanka is probably corruption. Yeah, because I have three simple examples. Recently, a friend of mine who kind of looks European, is Sri Lankan, speaks Sinhalese, but he looks European. And this taxi driver, the 3-wheel driver, who's supposed to charge 1,500 rupees, asked him to pay 7,500 rupees. This happened very recently. And in Sinhalese filth, he gave him tight and refused to pay a single penny. But this is the level. That's one. Another level is the most leading school. It's embarrassing. Even my alma mater conducts dane. This is priest involved, and the high echelons is involved to conduct huge danes costing millions. Believe me, it's millions and unaccounted millions that goes away, and no one's. The person who raises issue on this is the bad boy in town. Everyone is attacking him. He's expelled from the Old Boys Union and all sorts of stuff. But he's just fighting alone. So this is the culture that we have today. And don't forget, even people like Cabral, who has not yet been expelled from the Chartered Accountants body. I would be embarrassed to have anyone who has formed that kind of corruption to a nation in the body that I would serve professionally. But he still, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he still exists as a member, a proud member probably in the Chartered Accountants body. Similarly, not only Chartered Accountants, I believe someone mentioned about lawyers. Yes, every profession, even the doctors. It's such a deep issue for us. We should now be very sickened by the greed, corruption, and decadence widely spread in our country. And it is so deeply rooted. It is more like our national religion that we live by. So it cannot expect crooks to prosecute themselves, and it will need to be done by the civil society. My point is that this is not a political. Politicians are never going to address this because this is their bread and butter. This is their bread and butter. This has to be done by the civil society, but we alone just can't address this white elephant that we have in front of us. It's such a big elephant. So one of the solutions is this devolution of power is very critical to address, so that we will have smaller governance. And these kind of small things can be addressed because people will realize that it affects their own lives. Corruption affects their own lives. As a simple example is, I believe even in rural villages, people have to pay a bribe to the principal to admit their child. In rural villages, not in Colombo. Forget Colombo. Colombo, I believe, is running at 1 million rupees. In rural villages, they still have to pay a bribe to attend their child in the local school. And people are willing to pay that because that's the most convenient way to do this, and not realizing that it's destroying their own lives. So one core reason in governance, the reason that we have corruption in governance is because power without any principles. Our governance does not have any values and principles. So it's empty, and it naturally leads to corruption. So people need to start adapting adapting a new culture. And in order to do this, we have to get out of this national governance that we have. A couple of other things. Like I said, corruption has been democratized in Sri Lanka, as we have a web of corruption that not only spread all over, it trickles down very well through almost every public and private system. We need to realize how bad an impact corruption has on average people. This is the important part. We need to realize how it's affecting our personal lives. I don't know whether I can afford to pay, if I had 3 children, to pay $1 million each to admit my children to a good school. Corruption is not only institutionalized in Sri Lanka, it is protected by the branches of governance and is become part and parcel of life. We have a system that protects abuses and allows charges to be covered up with the immunity that we have granted to for governance. Average people average people need to realize that it is a system that prevents law-abiding citizens to live without embracing fraud and corruption. This is one of the important things. It's very difficult to live peacefully without contributing to corruption in the country. It is like sometimes we have to cover our eyes and noses and participate in corruption because that's how it is. The challenge is more like causing blood transfusion to our genetics and systems of governance. So the challenge is very high. We may have to chop this large elephant into small pieces or small governances, and people taking ownership rather than expecting some politicians to come and clean up our corrupt systems. That's my simple words. Thank you.
Thank you, Anura. Very high, very indeed. Your points are well taken. I think it's Leonard.
Yeah. So yes, Anura, thank you. I've already got cold feet as to see how to start this. But anyway, 2 other people are waiting to speak. Leonard, yes, Leonard.
Yes, I think we all agree on the situation in the country. In fact, in the constitution, it looks like first and foremost place is given to bribery and corruption in chapter 3. That looks like the religion or the spirit which people don't speak, but it is in the constitution. Putting that aside, I like to take the discussion in a slightly different direction. My understanding was that our plan A is to have a system change front or Peramuna to contest for the election for the presidency. I'd like to know what progress we have made. Or
okay, I'll update you there. That's why I said the parliament has fenced themselves to the presidential election. There is a regulation that the nominees should either come from a political party or should be someone already working in the legislature. That means a politician. Nobody else can make it. So that's the issue at the moment. So we've heard we have an obstacle there. But I think getting into the parliament is more important. But anyway, we are working on it. I'll keep you updated. Yeah, thank you.
So that's the first one. Do we intend to put to the people our manifesto now that we are in this situation?
The people's letter will go through. You will hear it, I think, by next week. Exactly what is being planned. We have some other action going on at the moment. So the next week Sunday meeting is actually system change Peramuna. So hopefully we'll be able to get some information there.
Yeah, because I see various parties, including JVP, putting their manifesto, supposed to have been prepared by somebody from the states.
We have a draft manifesto, but I think because we can't get anyone to contest in the presidential election, we will have to look for different ways of trying to get something done here. Okay, thank you.
And then that's plan A. I think plan B is to make the public aware of all this corruption and system change. If we can't do it in that way, we can do it another way, which is through public education, or as Basil mentioned, we have already groups coming up against corruption.
Yeah, we are working on developing a trailer in relation to the objectives of system change Peramuna, and that will probably include some of that. Yeah, that's happening.
And some of our very rich discussion that we had, I think, should go into the public media at some point, and that's where the masses are. Say we are the converted, as some people mentioned. Social media was mentioned, digitization was mentioned, code of conduct came up again and again, and discipline, the punishment that has to come, implementation. All these are very nice ideas. We are the converted in a sense, but it must go to the public. And that's where the change can take place. If plan A fails through us or through the leads, then plan B is without a party, even we should be able to put this before the election.
Yeah, correct. So we will try to develop a blueprint on this subject because it's such an important subject for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be writing to all of you shortly. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that, Leonard. And then we have two other people. Yes, Nilmini's raised hand again. Nilmini.
I put into the chat the corruptions index and where Sri Lanka is in there. It's an interesting reading. I just want to come back on one point that was raised. I know somebody had said that good enough governance is adequate, and that's obviously a very realistic view of things. But I think if you allow certain leeway, then you're actually not going to achieve what you need to achieve, even to the standard you might want it to go. So I think zero tolerance might be a better approach. And so if you've got rule of law, equality before the law, enforcement of the law, ethics, codes of practice, meritocracy, but zero tolerance approach, even though it sounds very drastic and you're not going to achieve it, but if you aim for something lower than that, then you're not going to achieve much at all. That was the thing that I wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Emily. The zero tolerance is already in some of our documents. It's not published yet, but thank you for highlighting its importance. We are trying to get there. Thank you. And yes, Gratian. Yes, Gratian.
Yep. Two things that Sri Lanka is a very, very sophisticated country. In Sri Lanka, you can live in Europe. You can live in USA, Australia, UK, the same lifestyle here if you have money. So right now I'm in Colombo because my daughter is here and they have taken an apartment, and Colombo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's a different world. The taxpayers pay money to maintain this world in Colombo. And these people who are living in Colombo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they don't pay enough taxes. They are being maintained by the masses. That is one point. I'm not going to elaborate on that. The good enough government is the notion that this government is not good enough. We need at least good enough government to go forward to the good governance. Then the other thing is the corruption is a symptom. The problem is the leadership. So most of these countries that have gone through this sort of corruption will have to find a leader, just one person, backed by some other good people, to change the system. So that even the system change peramuna is trying to do that. You are finding a person to rally around that person, the other similar like-minded people, and then cause the change. So one of the most important things when you do the documentation would be to come up with your code of ethics. Code of ethics for the system change peramuna, and then at least you can ask the other political parties, where are your code of ethics? That is an immediate change when we are facing the presidential election, hopefully within the just over 100 days, right? So if you come up with the prototype of a code of ethics for a political party doing some research, then you can adopt your own code of ethics and ask each of these parties who are putting a candidate to the presidential election, where is your code of ethics? And you come up with 10 criteria to evaluate the presidential candidates and their parties. And then put a non-partisan panel, maybe 100 people across the community, acceptable people, and rate these parties and the candidates and give a informed, objective opinion to the electorate, to the voters. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gracian. I think we've had very good discussion today and giving lots of ideas as to how to make progress. But I think at least for a start, we should try to outline a document, as to say, particularly telling what kind of action we can take. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I've just got your name saved. So I will send a letter shortly, do a draft, and then try and develop that. And next week, obviously, we will be talking more about the system change peramuna, that's action plans. And maybe I'll be able to brief you a little bit more about what's happening with us. Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening. And thank you very much. Yeah. See you next week.